Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast, episode 40 coming your way right now. Obviously, as I'm sure you would have guessed, this is a Zen 5 episode. We'll be going into many different things about this release, some of the feedback we saw from other reviewers and their reviews, talking a bit about the power efficiency relative to Zen 4 and all the commentary around that. Is Zen 5 really that much more power efficient than Zen 4? We talk about the pricing, how expensive it is, power limiting stuff, bottlenecking. We talk about, can Intel make a comeback? So many different angles in this episode. So hopefully you enjoy our little Zen 5 breakdown. Let's get into it. Steve, we're in for a massive episode this week. There is so much to talk about because of Zen 5 and all the, well, I think it's fair to say fallout at this point related to this release. At least we've got the first two CPUs. We'll be able to talk about them, the Ryzen 9 stuff next week. How's things over in testing land?
A little bit hungover. I'll be perfectly honest. But in testing land, we're obviously moving on to Ryzen 9 now. I think those reviews, actually, I definitely shouldn't say this. I was going to say, I think they'll go a little bit more smoothly for the fact that the TDP for those parts is the same as the previous generation. I think that'll catch fewer reviewers out, like we saw with the 65 watt, 105 watt TDP thing, which bizarrely still seems to be a bit of an issue. But anyway, plenty of testing still to come.
I think the most interesting thing from the Zen 5 reviews, and we're going into this podcast assuming that if you're listening, you have watched the reviews and you know all of the data, you know that Zen 5 is not a major improvement, at least for the sort of workloads that consumers can expect. The thing that really surprised me, and we were looking at this at like 11 o'clock at night when the reviews went live, we were checking out everyone else's reviews, and I'm not going to name names or anything. I don't really want to put anyone on blast, but it was very interesting to see some of the feedback from other reviewers. A lot of the data was in the ballpark of what we had found. The testing results there was a few outliers here and there, but on the whole, showing fairly small gains. It was interesting to see some reviewers come away with a much more positive opinion of the product, which was very interesting because we had many discussions ahead of the launch about our thoughts, like just between us and how the data you were showing was not good. And then to see other people with showing the same sort of thing, but coming to more positive conclusions. Yeah, I thought was a little, I don't want to say it's like it's not bad reviewing or anything. It's just interesting to see the difference of opinions there.
Yeah, I think you can sort of categorize them as three different types of reviews. So there were reviews like ours, which I think you can say Gamers Nexus was similar, Gear Seekers, probably Technics. There's a few others where we showed that the Zen 5 performance isn't great for mainstream computing, so primarily gaming, because we always primarily focus on gaming. Gamers Nexus, it's right there in the name. So we showed results that weren't great, certainly not as great as what we were expecting based on the expectations set by AMD. And we basically said that. We're like, this is underwhelming. This is not great. That was the sentiment across those reviewers that did that. Then there was the second type of reviews, which you've touched on, where they showed exactly what we showed, where the gaming performance gains weren't great, but somehow they still had a positive spin on it. Like there was a focus on power efficiency, which was done incorrectly with a lot of the review outlets, which was a bit disappointing to see. But yeah, there was a disconnect between their thumbnail, their title, their introduction, their conclusion compared to the results, which was interesting to see. And then there was a third type of review where Zen 5 just looked really good. Like it performed pretty well. The gaming gains were decent. The performance uplift was huge. There was great efficiency improvements, and therefore they were impressed. So not really sure about those ones. That, admittedly, from what I saw, there wasn't that many of those reviews. I think by and large, the bulk of reviewers showed pretty underwhelming performance. It was just how the reviewers went about interpreting that performance. Yeah. And look, I'm not here to sell you the product. I'm not here to try and justify its existence or what makes it good. I'm here to evaluate the product, show you the data, and then I'll give you our opinion on that data. And yeah, again, we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to be like, oh, well, it's basically, I said it anyway, like it's a bit more efficient, which is the truth. It's not phenomenally more efficient. It's not, I've seen other reviewers use all this language about how insanely efficient Zen 5 is. It's not. It's just not insanely efficient. It's a bit more efficient. and it's a little bit faster overall. And that is Zen 5 in a nutshell for PC enthusiasts.
Yeah, I think the reviews that you're talking about, sort of that last category, some of the people like Phoronix, for example, I think Wendell, who come at it from a different angle that are
Which is
sort of
fine.
testing it on Linux or for other applications.
Mhm.
And obviously they came to much more positive conclusions because in some of those highly specific, I wouldn't necessarily say highly specific, but Zen 5 is not really the desktop parts. I wouldn't expect to be used very much for Linux or server applications. So,
Sure.
the sort of discussion of AVX 512 performance, it's nice to see that Zen 5 works really well for those sorts of AVX 512 applications. Unfortunately for consumers, AVX 512 just isn't widely used. So it's just not something that I think for most consumers of those parts that I don't think that stuff is overly relevant. But again, I'm not saying those reviews were wrong. It's just that they're coming from their perspective. They're like, how does this work on, like Phoronix, for example? How does it work on Linux? What is it good for typical Linux tasks? That's how they frame their review. Turns out it works really well for that sort of stuff. It's just unfortunate that for Windows gaming applications, which I think, especially for Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7 parts, the majority of people buying these CPUs, at least the boxed retail versions, are using it for those sort of tasks, and it just doesn't perform that well for that. But yeah, like there's a range of different opinions and interesting comments and claims that people have tried to use to say that Zen 5 is a lot better than it is, because I think there's some interesting discussion around pricing, power efficiency, and those sort of things. So let's start with the power efficiency claims, because the overwhelming majority of comments criticizing your review, and there were a lot of people trying to, I don't know, cope for the results a little bit. The overwhelming majority of those were talking about how you had overlooked that Zen 5 was massively more power efficient, and therefore the CPU was a big success because AMD had focused on delivering slightly more performance at a huge saving to power. And there was even comments about how, reviewers, they're too focused on big benchmark numbers and huge performance wins, and they're ignoring the efficiency. Isn't it a win if a CPU is basically the same but not doing an Intel and giving you lots more efficiency? But it's not really the case, is it?
Well, if the efficiency was improved to the degree that a lot of these people have been, in some instances, certainly misled or coping, whatever, which, there's probably a little bit of both, let's be honest, because some reviewers did show massive efficiency improvements because they were comparing really inefficient versions of Zen 4 to efficient versions of Zen 5. So it's funny how that would end up going. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of that going on, that people just were misinformed, because if you do take a 65-watt Zen 4 part, and I don't know, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here, Tim. I don't really know how to understand this, because it's like reviewers at large forgot that there were 65-watt Zen 4 parts and their performance was almost identical to the 105-watt parts. Like, I remember when Zen 4 launched and you got the 105-watt parts and we're like, ooh, these run a bit hot and they suck down a fair bit of power. But, the overall performance is pretty good. So there's obviously some other issues with Zen 4 motherboard pricing, memory pricing, that sort of stuff. But I remember thinking, oh, okay. And then, excuse me, a few people tried the eco mode. And then that sort of started to point in the direction that, oh, maybe this is how they should have been stock. Then AMD released the Non-X versions that were 65 watts, and we were much happier with those. We thought this was a better overall, more balanced, more well-rounded product. You were losing a teeny tiny bit, like a couple of percent of performance for a massive reduction, like a 40% reduction or something in terms of power consumption. So that happened. And now we've got Zen 5 coming out at 65 watt, which everyone knows they're 65 watt parts. Everyone's talking about how they're 65 watt parts, and almost nobody is comparing them directly with 65 watt Zen 4. And if you do so, you find that, they're like, as we said, they're a little bit faster and they're a little bit more power efficient. If you test the 7700 Non-X and the 9700X, they both draw the same amount of power. And in a workload like Cinebench, the 9700X is about 7% faster for the same power consumption. I think Tech Power Up showed in Handbrake, it was about a 10% gain. So you're in the realm of 7 to 10% better performance at the same power. That's it. That's great. Like, it's a power efficiency improvement. And yeah, that's, I'm not saying it's not nothing. It's not bad. It's just that when it comes to the gaming side of things, that power efficiency goes out the window. There's almost no difference there in terms of power usage. And there's really minimal gains in terms of FPS performance uplift. So from a gaming perspective, they are a flop. They're a bit of a disaster because of things like we've waited 2 years for this and they cost 20 to 40% more.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't think our thumbnails were clickbait at all. They're my true feelings about Zen 5, especially based on, the 16% IPC claims and the fact that, the 9700X was going to be much faster than the 14700K for gaming, which absolutely isn't the case. So, I don't know, am I getting sidetracked, Tim? Did I answer the question about the power?
No, I mean, I think that if the parts were significantly more efficient, then that would kind of have saved the release to some degree. I mean,
yeah, sort of.
Not to the full degree, because I think for most gamers, people only care about efficiency when these sort of things come up. It's kind of like, oh, the performance is kind of a bit crappy, so let's try and find some other things to make it seem like a win. And we've seen that in the past with GPUs and various things. Like, people will look to efficiency and other things, but when it comes down to it, people generally don't care all that much about efficiency unless it's extremely ridiculous. If it's within a couple of percent one way or another between competing parts, it doesn't matter all that much. And so, I mean, if it was like half the power, you'd be like, okay, that's actually, they weren't able to extract much more performance, but it's much more efficient. So at least they kind of did something. There's something to point to there. But with the actual results of the part in terms of how you've examined the performance, 65 watts versus 65 watts, it just isn't a reason to justify these parts. It isn't a reason to make Zen 5 good. It's not good because of its efficiency.
It's absolutely a positive. The thing is, and this is what you sort of touched on, where people were saying, Hardware Unboxed, this just shows how short-sighted their reviews are, focusing just on FPS numbers. No, we're not focusing just on FPS numbers. That's a huge component of the evaluation process. But we're like, what are we factoring in, Tim? Efficiency, outright performance, price.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that, like, I can't state this enough. Like, the 7700X has cost less than the current asking price of the 9700X for over a year. So time is a factor, is it not?
Yeah.
Like,
this is a really good
point. It's replacing a 2-year-old product, and it costs more than that 2-year-old product has cost for the last 12 months. So that's a huge blow to the success of this Zen 5 part. So, as I said, there's a whole range of factors that we consider to shape our review. It's just not FPS numbers not big enough, therefore flop. Like, it's not that simple, guys. We spend a whole week evaluating this from multiple different angles for the use cases that we believe our audience is using them for, which is largely gaming, and then maybe some Photoshop, Premiere, all that sort of stuff. And then we factor in everything to make our conclusion. It's not just a one thing where we're like, number not big enough, therefore flop. Like,
yeah. And I feel like some people have been, especially when the pricing was announced and there's been a bit of analysis, and I've seen it in some reviews as well. Most reviews did compare it to the current price of Zen 4, not the launch price.
Mm-hmm.
But there has been some discussion of how Zen 5 is cheaper, and I'm using inverted comments here, than Zen 4. Which is not the case. It is not cheaper than Zen 4. It's more expensive. And I think this has been a classic example of a company trying to compare things MSRP versus MSRP. So AMD is saying, hey, it's a little cheaper than what we launched Zen 4 at. So if you're comparing launch versus launch, Zen 5 is a lower MSRP than Zen 4. Fair enough. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Zen 4 MSRP is almost a fake price. And I say that in kind of the opposite way to what we saw with NVIDIA GPUs during the crypto boom, where they would have an MSRP, and then for most of the life of that product, it's sold above the MSRP. With Ryzen CPUs, it's almost always the other way. So they launch at $450 for the 7800X3D, for example, and then within a couple of months, you're getting it for $50, maybe even $100 less. And so, yes, there was a small window where Zen 4 processors cost the MSRP across the lineup. But when the product is available for 2 years and for 12 to 18 months, it's below the MSRP, it makes no sense to compare Zen 5 pricing to the Zen 4 MSRP. You should be comparing it to maybe the current price is obviously fair because that's what people are buying right now. But what's also, if you wanted to be a bit more reasonable to the entire, generation lifespan of that product, you'd look at, okay, what was the typical price that it would have cost you to get a 7700X, a 7600X? It's not the MSRP. These are not last minute discounts. It's not, Zen 5's coming out. Quick, let's rush those out, the Zen 4 CPUs out the door. Let's drop their pricing. These CPUs have been much cheaper for a much longer period of time. And that price is so important for reviews. It's, I would say, the most important factor to consider in the conclusion of any review. And so when you're comparing current pricing for Zen 4 that most people have had access to for ages, like they've been cheaper than MSRP for ages, and then comparing that to Zen 5, it doesn't come out well. These CPUs, AMD cannot be pricing these CPUs based on 2-year-old MSRPs that they themselves dropped the price of within months. It makes no sense. It's not how these products should be priced. And I think the only way that would have worked is if Zen 4 was the MSRP for months, years, until the last couple of months, and then they drop the price. It's not the case.
Yeah, the other angle is, though, I can appreciate the MSRP comparison. And for GPUs, for example, we do MSRP versus MSRP, how that works out to be cost per frame, and then MSRP for the new product versus the retail product, so the real world pricing. But we know for a fact, we're pretty confident at this point in time that Zen 5 is going to be reduced in price, right? And I can foresee a point in time where people are going to be like, Hardware Unboxed, you're recommending Zen 5 now. Isn't it a flop? Isn't it a disaster? And it's like, look, guys, at some point in time, Ryzen 7000 is not going to be on the market. And it's going to be replaced by Ryzen 9000. Now, the Ryzen 9000 processors are perfectly fine. You may be shocked to hear me say that. They're a bit of a flop, or they're a flop in the sense relative to the 2-year-old part they're replacing. They're offering really nothing to consumers in terms of added performance. They're a very minor improvement. So, yeah, there is going to be a point in time where Ryzen 7000's gone, 9000 replaces it, and that's what we'll be recommending probably. I mean, we don't know what Intel parts will be competing with those, but at some point, these will be parts that we recommend because they will have dropped in price. So they're not going to stay at the MSRP forever. Eventually, they will become better in terms of value. It's just that we're not really moving the needle forward. But if it was a situation, let's say, where you were getting 10, let's go 50, let's be greedy. Let's say you're getting 15% better gaming performance on average.
Yeah.
But they cost 25 to 40% more. That's still not good in terms of value, but you can sit back and go, look, you're getting a nice little performance uplift here, or a good performance uplift here. Right now, if you have to buy right now, you buy a 7800X 3D, right? That's what you buy. But this is a good sign for the upcoming X3D chips, and it also means when this, say the 9700X, eventually or inevitably drops to the same price as the 7700X, it's going to be a good buy. So not all hope is lost. But at the moment, we're sitting here going, well, if the 9700X drops down to the exact same price as the 7700X, that's a nice little tiny upgrade. It's
yeah.
It just basically means you were kind of selling that product now for 4 years by the time you get to the end of the product cycle for the 9700X, which is like, it got a little bit of an update mid-product cycle over those 4 years. I don't. Can you get that excited about a 9700X for $290, the same price as the 7700X? For me, it's like, oh, okay. I guess if I'm building a system today, that's a nice little bonus. But if I had have built any time in the last 2 years, I'd hardly be devastated that I'm missing out on 3% gaming performance.
Yeah, that's right. I think what you want to see over time with all product releases is a pretty steady, like linear reduction in price at the same level of performance. So you want it to be slowly getting better price to performance over time. What
Yep.
you don't want to see, and what I feel like the Zen 5 CPU launch has done, is as the trough of Zen 5 is... So Zen 5's price dropping down. So it's sort of trending down in a nice direction. Zen 5 has reversed that trend back up. So instead of the price to performance getting better over time, they've reversed it down so that over time, when prices, they drop prices in the future, let's say 3 months from now, then they can start, the price to performance starts climbing, getting better and better over time again. And that's not what you want to see. Like, it's all well and good that in a couple of months, these CPUs may be a little cheaper than they are now. But if they're getting to the same price that Zen 4 was right now in a couple of months, there's been no real movement in the market at all. You're just getting the exact same part with a little bit more performance at the exact same price. And right now, they're not even giving you that. There's a similar part at even higher price. So yeah, we don't want to get into a cycle where every generation there's this bump in price, this reduction in value at launch, only for them to later correct it back to the norm, so that it's just stagnation every single generation, every single year. And I don't think we can hang our hats on, oh, these CPUs are going to be better value in a couple of months. It's maybe the value will be better than Zen 4, but with the pricing trends that we've seen, it's not. I think it will be very similar in price to performance level, comparing a cheaper version of Zen 5 to Zen 4. It's not going to really do all that much, which I think that really plays into your commentary around it being disappointing, it being a flop. It's like, if it doesn't start out well, then it needs to have overcorrections to get it back to a position where it's a really good improvement generation over generation. And I just don't foresee that really happening, considering how things have gone at AMD Ryzen in the last couple of generations. So the other angle that a lot of people were bringing up was about these CPUs being heavily power limited, and that somehow AMD going with the 65-watt TDP has destroyed the performance of the 9700X, and that chip actually has a lot of headroom available. Once you enable PBO, you can bring it back up to the power consumption of the 7700X, and there's all this performance ready to go. But based on your testing, it seems like that's another angle that isn't really there. That isn't all that much to be gained from things like PBO.
No, with this refined process node, you can either get something like 20% better power efficiency or 10% better performance, but you can sort of pick one or the other. And if it was 105 watt TDP, for example, you would see a very similar thing. It might scale a little bit better, but you would see a similar thing between the 7700 and the 7700X, right? Where you blast it with more power and you get a little bit more performance, but using a lot more power. So, and this is why I think I'm guessing at this point in time, because I'm yet to start really testing them, but I think the 9950X and the 7950X reviews and the 12 core parts will be a bit more interesting. I think reviewers are going to be scratching their head going, hang on, where'd that power efficiency go? Because they're both 120 watt and 170 watt parts. I think that's going to cause some confusion there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Just it seems like it's. I don't know whether I want to use cope again, but it's like there's been a
use
few.
It, Tim.
There's been a few tests that have shown that PBO can deliver a little bit more performance for these parts. But yeah, once you start getting up to the higher tier models where the power difference between the two CPUs is a lot smaller than it is at the Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7 tier. Yeah, if you're giving it unlocked performance, and based on your PBO numbers for the 9700X, which didn't really show that much of an improvement,
I think we got 11%, but DeBauer showed if you really blast it with max PBO, you can get about 20% more performance. Now, this was in their hardware bot benchmark, their H.265 encoding test. They got 20% more performance, and that's caused a whole heap of misunderstanding, let's say, in the PC enthusiast circles. So yeah, it was 20% faster than 9700X with DeBauer's PBO efforts, which is great. Did use 80% more power, which is exactly what I'm talking about. So
yeah,
and he blasted it beyond what would be a 105 watt TDP. So yeah, you can get 20% more performance in certain multi-core workloads for about 80% more power. Is that amazing? Is that great? It just sounds like overclocking to me.
Yeah, it's like, could that have been achieved with the 7700X? I mean, if you really go all out overclocking that chip, there's probably a little bit there to be gained. I haven't...
Maybe 10%, which would make sense because the 9700X should be about 10% faster. But also, I guess, okay, the big problem with this DeBauer result, and there's nothing wrong with DeBauer's work, by the way. DeBauer does excellent work. I just want to make that very clear, is the interpretation of his work. I can't believe how many people I saw on r/AMD going, DeBauer did a better job than Harbor Unboxed. He understands the products better. He's showing that if you know how to tweak them, if you know, like, that is... So I'm getting sidetracked.
The tweaking angle again.
Tim,
it's like Intel memory tuning.
Oh, mate. The worst thing about the PC enthusiast community, certain people involved in it, is the whole you don't know how to set up a computer. I know how to set up a computer. If you set it up right, this is like a whole generation better, this processor. But this even happened with remember a Vega 56? If you reduce if you undervolt it by 20%, it ends up being 20% faster. And this has always been a thing with these PC nerds. Some of them, I know it's a vocal minority, guys, but you just see it littered throughout comment sections. It's all over Reddit, all in the YouTube comments. If you just knew how to set this up correctly, you wouldn't be seeing the garbage performance you're seeing. Now,
it happens exclusively when products are bad too. It's like no one's ever like, let's tune my 7800X3D so that I get 5% more performance. Everyone's stock, this thing is amazing. Let's just chuck that in my system. And to be fair, the Reddit comments most Reddit comments I saw on these releases were actually very reasonable. But you are talking about
Reddit was very impressive. I was blown away. I'm like, hang on, I'm on r/AMD. I'm on r/hardware. Is this like a Marvel thing? Am I in an alternate reality? Have I changed universes here, Tim? These are all really level-headed, great responses from people. Good job, guys. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what's happened there. If it was years ago, it was more the radicals that had infested those parts, and now the normies like us have found their way in there, and they're like, yeah, guys, this just... Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked like I said I was. What's happening here is, as far as I can tell, reading a lot of these comments, people are seeing 20% faster with PBO enabled and just applying that indiscriminately to everything. Steve, enable PBO, you get 20% better performance. DeBauer showed that his PBO 20% in his hardware bot thing did very little for gaming, which is exactly what we showed. He was showing a couple of percent uplift with his 20% gain PBO. So that 20% figure applies to a specific benchmark. It cannot be applied to gaming, guys. PBO doesn't make gaming anywhere near 20% faster. You're talking about low single-digit gains.
Yeah, I mean, making the part 105 watts instead of 65 watts wouldn't have drastically changed the reviews based on all the testing that we've seen. It's not something that would have
that's made what I wanted
Zen
to mention.
5 great and suddenly all the reviews have flipped. It's not a mistake that AMD made that has hurt them with this release. The 65 watt TDP makes sense. You're just not getting all that much from this part.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's what I was saying. I was going to say about DeBauer's title is that he was saying that, it's power limited, which in a sense is true for what he's shown in those benchmarks where you can produce bigger number, but blasting it with more power doesn't actually help for a lot of the stuff that our audience wants to see, which is stuff like gaming performance. It's not going to boost performance there by any meaningful amount. All it's going to do is ruin the efficiency of the part.
Yeah, that's right. And with those things, it's always a balancing act. If AMD knew that the plus 20% massive overclock was the better way to release this part, they probably would have. Like these days, it's very rare for companies to produce parts with major amounts of overclocking headroom. It just that really doesn't happen these days. And of course, it's always a product sample sort of thing. Is that overclock going to be stable on every part that comes out or just a handful of parts? So even if AMD did want to, let's say they want to make it a 200 watt part to really harness massive amounts of power, is that even going to work across most of the 7700Xs that they produce? So there's all those factors that go into designing and producing the part. And I think that if anything, going the way they have has at least allowed them to have some sort of marketing points, because there were a bunch of discussion throughout their presentations about the efficiency gains of the processor. And yeah, they're not amazing, and they were probably exaggerated in quite a significant degree in some of those charts, but the focus of efficiency is one angle that you can take, and you will not have that angle if you make the part 200 watts to win benchmark charts by a little bit more. So there's all those sort of angles that they're trying to balance, and I think that what they ultimately went with didn't hurt the reviews all that much, especially if what you're seeing in gaming, like if it doesn't give you 10% more gaming performance to make the gaming gains at least somewhat reasonable, then it's a bit pointless.
Yeah, I mean, AMD could have handled this way better. Rather than showing one game, which I believe was Far Cry 3, showing a 10% uplift, they should have just been honest and said, look, in terms of gaming performance, for the most part, you're not going to see much of a gain here. 5% sort of on average will be a best case scenario across reviews. It's not really about improving gaming performance. It's about improving, these certain applications and instruction sets. And it's more of a server focused product, but you will see some efficiency gains on the desktop. So it's a minor up. They without saying it's exactly like that, they could have essentially said something to that effect, and people would have been like, oh, okay, all right. And expectations would have been set, and you wouldn't have got the reception that you got. I mean, ultimately, it still would have been the same product. We would have evaluated it the same way and been like, well, look, don't buy this at this point in time. It is what AMD said it is. It's not worth a 20% or 40% price premium. So sit tight, wait for prices to come down. But look, it would have been disappointing no matter which way you slice it, because you've had the option to buy Zen 4 for 2 years. If you want to buy something now, you've been holding out or whatever, or you're on an AM4, you've got a 5800X 3D, you want to upgrade. And I saw a lot of people with 5800X 3Ds saying, I'm not that upset about this, Steve. Like, while it would have been nice to have something to upgrade to, at least I get to keep using my CPU, which is, it's true. It's a funny way of looking at it. But at the same time, your 5800X 3D is not getting any faster. So it'll slowly keep falling down. Not necessarily relative to other parts if they don't get faster, but it will get slower as games become inevitably more demanding as the years go on.
Yeah, I think we've got a video coming up on the Hardware Unboxed channel sort of looking at some of AMD's blunders with launches over the last couple of years that I think probably plays into this next little bit of discussion. But I think there's different levels that AMD could have chosen to use when it comes to Zen 5, depending on how good they want the reception to be. And certainly, obviously making the part better is the ultimate solution to all these problems. But when it comes to the marketing side of things, the more mistakes that you make in the way that you approach the marketing, the worse the reception is going to be. So for example, if AMD was more accurate in their pre-release information, the marketing numbers were more in line with what the actual performance of the product is, then as you say, yes, the product is still disappointing at the same price. It's not amazing. People are going to be like, oh, it's not too much of an uplift for the same sort of money. Bit of a stagnation release, but at least you don't get the, oh, I was expecting it to be a lot better, but now it's not. So they could have, the very first step that they could have taken was being more accurate with the marketing information. That sets the tone of what's to come a bit better. And yeah, it kills hype at the time that you announce the product, because everyone's like, oh, what's Zen 5 going to bring? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Blah, blah, blah. Let's figure it out. They announce it. Oh, it's not that much of an upgrade. Hype killed. But that hype was always going to be killed by the reviews anyway. So whether you do it ahead of time or wait for the reviews to come out and be negative and kill the hype,
yeah, it's inevitable.
either way, the reaction is inevitable. The actual performance of the product comes out at some point, and people will be let down by that at some point.
Review it right now. So we've seen everyone's reviews right now. We're no longer in the dark.
Yep.
It's not just our review. Okay, so across all the reviews you've seen, especially the guys that do really great testing, Tech Power Up, for example, what would you say an accurate average performance uplift for gaming is? Like a number. What is it? We got about 3%. Tech Power Up got 2%. Others I saw get up to about 5%. So do you want to be generous and say, look, it's a 5% gain on average? Or do we want to go
Yeah, I think
lower?
a 5% gain is probably about where it is. Again, we haven't really seen the higher two parts, but yeah,
So
somewhere in
if-
that 1 to 5% range.
So if you're going 5% as sort of best case as your average uplift, for those who aren't able to do the numbers quickly, that's like 60 to 63 frames per second is exactly 5%.
Yep.
So 100, 105 type thing. So we're talking about literal frames per second improvement.
Yeah, negligible. Yep.
Negligible. Yep. And we've been consistent with this language and this way of thinking forever. Like whenever we compare GPUs and we say, the Radeon GPU is 5% faster or the GeForce GPU is 5% faster, therefore we deem it a tie because 5% overall is a negligible difference. You're going to find, it just doesn't change the gaming experience for you. So negligible difference in terms of gaming performance at 5%. Application benchmarks, what we saw up to 10%, but the average is probably more like 5% there again because it's slower in applications.
I think for typical desktop applications that a user would be doing, that 10% is probably at the upper limit of what you would see.
Best case, yeah.
It seems clear that if you are using things like Linux and some specific workloads, that you can get a 15% average, like that is possible. And obviously AVX 512, that is significantly faster. So if you use that is possible. But I think among general workloads, somewhere around 5 to 10%. So a little better than the gaming performance, but not huge.
Let's go 5 to 10%. And then relative, and this is really compared, say, 7700 to the 9700X because, the 7700 and 7700X are a couple of percent different. So realistically, in terms of efficiency, you're looking at anywhere from 0 to 3% efficiency improvement for gaming. And then for core heavy workloads, you're looking at anywhere from a 5 to 10% efficiency improvement.
Sure. Yep.
So if we go across games and applications, I think a 5% efficiency improvement.
Yep.
So we're sort of getting into the ballpark here of it being like around 5% better by all measurable metrics for desktop users. And what? It's about, I think the 9700X should be about 25% more expensive than the 7700. So we've worked it out that you're getting about 5% better performance, 5% better power efficiency for about 25% more money. How else would you conclude that information, Tim? And it's against a 2-year-old part.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it is. I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? And
it is.
I think the issue is that if AMD did come out and market this chip as being 5% faster, 5 to 10% faster, 5% more efficient, and was honest with the realistic gaming performance and gains that you could get out of this part, they couldn't have priced it where they priced it. Like it wouldn't have worked. Like they could say, oh yeah, we're comparing MSRP versus MSRP. That would have not come out too well. But really for this release, like you can market this product better and sort of set expectations. People won't be as disappointed. It will still come out that the product is not that great. And so the second step they really need to take is make the product cheaper. Like it's not at the right price. Zen 5 is not a bad CPU. It's not flawed. There's not some issue with it where, it's crashing all the time like an Intel CPU, or it uses extreme amounts of power and it's really hard to cool, or there's some bug with it that just doesn't make things work or something, fundamentally, it's very similar to Zen 4, and Zen 4 is a good CPU product line.
Technically, it's overall a couple of % better.
Yeah, technically, if you were ignoring price and there were no other products, technically this is a good processor. And in those scenarios when there aren't technical flaws, there aren't issues, the tried and true thing of there's no bad products, only bad prices strongly comes into play here. So Zen 5 could have been a great generation if they drop prices. If AMD came out and said, right, this CPU is designed, and this is how I would have marketed it. This is not good for their bottom line. So let's be very clear here. This strategy is not good for their margins, and that's why they didn't do it. So before we'll head off all those comments first.
And it's a server architecture, so they're going to make bank on EPYC, and they don't really care about
server architecture, all those factors included into this discussion, right? This is how I would have marketed this product. This is how I would have sold it, right? We have made the Zen 5 architecture for the future of CPU performance. Like we have included AVX 512 support. We have beefed up many areas to the CPU so that future software can take better use of this architecture. It's designed for the future. But right now, this CPU for general applications is a little faster than our Zen 4 design. Hopefully in the future, applications will make this CPU much faster, and that's what it's designed for. But right now, it's a little faster. It's also a little more power efficient. Like with architectural gains, we're able to shake up a few things. It's a little more power efficient. It's using the same process node, and we're giving you the same core count. But what we've done is this CPU is much cheaper. So if you weren't super all up on Zen 4, get Zen 5. It's going to be great in the future. It's going to be a little better now, and it's way cheaper. That would have sold. That chip would have sold. If the 6-core model was like $200 at launch or less than $200 at launch, flying off shelves. If the 8-core model was $250, $220 or something, gangbuster sales, like crazy sales, right? So Zen 5 isn't bad. It's just that they launched it assuming that it was much better than it was. All their claims of it being 15% better, 20% better or whatever, faster than 7800 X3D in gaming, all that stuff makes sense. If that was true, then the price kind of makes sense. Like you can sort of justify it a little bit because it's not really how the part performs in a lot of general applications and stuff, it can't be justified. But again, like they will not sell you an 8-core CPU for $220, which is why they didn't price it at that level. So that's unfortunately the reality of the situation. But yeah, like sometimes if things just don't go your way, things just don't work out, then you got to pull some other levers. You got to give people more cores at the same price, make the Ryzen 5 an 8-core model, do something like that. Shake it up a little bit, because if it turns out that it's 5% better across a range of different areas after 2 years at a higher price, yeah, just not a successful strategy, that one. I think as well with these processors, AMD, if the processors aren't amazing, they probably need to be making some moves sooner rather than later for things like pricing, but also getting out X3D processors and also Zen 6. I think they really cannot give this another 2 years until Zen 6. I don't know what their roadmap is looking like, but you wouldn't want effectively the same processor on the market for about 4 years. I think that gives too much of an opportunity for companies like Intel. Don't know whether they will, their next generation parts will be any good, but if you have the same part for 4 years, that's pretty much what Intel did that allowed Ryzen to get a foothold in the market. So yeah, Zen 6 needs to be coming out, I would say, pretty soon.
Yeah, well, there's obviously availability of process nodes and stuff like that really dictates when that can come to market. It's I would have thought somewhat out of AMD's hands on that, since they don't own TSMC and they can only do what they can do there. So not quite sure on how all of that looks and when they can bring that to market. And of course, just bringing Zen 6 to market doesn't guarantee you anything. Look, if Zen 6 is a flop, in our opinion, then AMD 5 is going to go down as a pretty crap platform, which will be disappointing, unless somehow Zen 7 squeezes on there and that's actually good. But that would be
Mhm.
extremely unexpected. I mean, you personally aren't even, you're not convinced Zen 6 will land on AM5, which I find amazing.
Well, the hang up that I have on that is that we know Zen 6 is a thing, it's in roadmaps.
Mhm, mhm,
AMD still isn't able to say that Zen 6 is on AM5, which I
mm,
think I would think that's a win. Like you would just say that, you'd be like, yes, our Zen 6 architecture is an AM5 design. Like it's
mhm.
very, very simple. You know, it's not revealing too much about your future products. It's not cannibalizing sales in any way. If anything, it's going to make AM5 sales better because people will have the confirmed knowledge that if they buy a product now, there is an upgrade for them. I think their language has been very concerning, and I think the marketing that we've seen for Zen 5 and the XT processor that you looked at before Zen 5, a lot of that stuff was misleading. So I wouldn't be taking their face claims at face value at the moment. I don't think they have earned that trust throughout this processor release. So when AMD comes out and they originally say this CPU is the AM5 platform supported to 2025, their original claim, 2025 plus, sorry, it's a little different. They update that to 2027. They're still claiming they're supporting AM4 now.
Mm,
And as we know, there has been no new architecture or generation on AM4. It's the
mhm.
same Zen 3 refreshers, X3D refreshers, APU refreshers. It's the same stuff. Yet they are claiming that AM4 is still a supported platform. So it's possible that even though AM5 is supported to 2027, that we see maybe some X3D parts, maybe a new APU generation, so a Ryzen 10,000. I don't know whether they use that language for the next APU series, but the next APUs, whatever those are, Ryzen 10,000, that could be supported coming out in 2025 or 2026 or something. Then a couple of refreshers, like XT level refreshers, those sorts of things, that gets you to 2027. And I don't know. I would just feel much more comfortable believing that if AMD just said Zen 6 is on AM5. End of story. It's on it. You will be getting this architecture. I've asked them several times and they come back with the very similar sort of marketing speak, seem to be not really wanting to confirm next generation stuff on them, which I get it. You don't want to talk about next gen products right before launching your current gen products. I don't know. I'm not saying that I would bet money that Zen 6 is not on AM5, but I'm not 100% convinced. So that's my position at the moment.
Well, I will say that I agree with your reasoning. It's logical. It's a sound train of thought. It all makes sense. And I completely agree that it's a big win for AMD. That's easy to have, so why not have it? And if they're not going to have the easy win, then it calls into question the future of AM5. But look, Tim, I'm just in the camp of coping here. Like, if Zen 6 is not on AM5, holy crap. Like, that's going to be so bad. So bad. Yeah, can't overstate it enough how bad it's going to be if Zen 6 requires a new platform. So I personally find that extremely difficult to believe in the face of all your sound logic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going full cope mode on that one. And if it turns out that you're right and Zen 6 isn't on AM5, I will be so deep in cope mode that I won't even be able to accept the official information. That's how bad it's going to be.
There's a few other things that could play into that decision as well. The design, the architecture of Zen 5, it does seem to have some architectural bottlenecks. So they've clearly improved significant parts of the core design. Like there's no doubt about it based on their information. They have overhauled this core. There's significant changes.
Except for that IO die, obviously.
Yeah, but that's one aspect, right?
Does that require a new socket?
Well, for example, if it comes out that they put in a new IO die, it changes some things up, it improves memory support, those sorts of things, but it's still heavily memory bandwidth limited, and they needed to move to maybe not necessarily DDR6, but let's say they needed more memory channels. Like they're like, this thing is so bottlenecked that we need to make this a quad channel design or something, right?
Uh-huh.
You reckon they're doing that on AM5? You reckon they're making AM5 suddenly quad channel memory? Because they probably won't do that.
Won't work. Yeah.
So
no idea. Yeah.
I mean, it's possible that they could make it work but again, the AM5 socket probably isn't designed for quad channel memory, but I don't know. But it seems like the obvious future support for this CPU would be, updating the IO die. That will likely improve some aspects to, if it is heavily memory bottlenecked or it's memory latency bottlenecked because of the IO die, the fabric, those sorts of things, an IO die overhaul would improve that with a future generation. But if it needs more than that to deliver any sort of gain, and that's related to things like memory channels, memory bandwidth that they can't get on AM5, then it's just a CPU generation that won't work on the AM5 platform. I'm not saying, like, I can see either camp one way or the other. I could see change the IO die, fix some things, improve the architecture, and that working on AM5, so therefore release that part. I could see them going the other way. But I think they've kind of forced themselves to do path A and make it work on AM5 by claiming that it's supported to 2027. So those are my thoughts, at least. Probably a bit rambling there, just my thoughts on where the platform's going and those sorts of things. But yeah,
it's an interesting one. Interesting one indeed. I don't know how that's going to play out, but concerning.
So how's your excitement for the CPU market at the moment after this? Like, you've seen Zen 5, your reviews, you could feel the disappointment making those products, but obviously we've got other stuff coming out throughout the rest of the year, like X3D, Intel parts.
Yeah, well, when people asked me at Computex, what are you excited for? And obviously I said, I'm excited for Zen 5 because it's been announced. It's coming up next. So I'm not one for leaks and rumors and stuff and what's on the horizon and getting excited about that. I'm excited by what's in front of me. And what was in front of me at Computex was Zen 5. We had IPC claims of 16%, and historically, a 16% IPC claim for Ryzen means good things. So based on that alone, I was reasonably confident we were in for something decent. And that was that. Like, Arrow Lake is arguably more exciting than Zen 5 by a country mile, right? It's a full overhaul, new socket, new platform, much more exciting in that sense. But it's further away. It's a bit further down the track. We know less about it. So while I'm excited for that, I was more excited for what was directly in front of us. So I guess, I have to hold out hope now that Arrow Lake's great and wrecks Zen 5 in terms of gaming performance. And, we'll possibly be back on the Intel bandwagon there like we were for a very long time. It's funny to watch, having done this job for over 20 years now, how this ebbs and flows. Like, there was a point in time where we couldn't, with a straight face, recommend an AMD processor. They were that bad. And prior to that, AMD CPUs were pretty good. We used to sit here. Well, I did. You were barely born. And sort of go, gee, it'd be nice to do an AMD build. But you just can't. Like, we couldn't recommend AMD processors or do an AMD build. And you're sitting here as a tech journalist. Hate to sort of use that term because I feel like we're just PC enthusiasts who have a bit of fun. But you want to mix it up and, I don't want to just build an Intel system, then build another Intel system, then build another Intel system, and 3 years later build another Intel system. But that's how it was for a long time. And, AMD fans weren't happy. Then Ryzen came out and it was a bit rocky to begin with, and it got to the point where you couldn't really, for most people, unless it was like peak premium gaming, recommend Intel because they just got blasted in terms of value. So if you wanted a good value PC, it was Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7. And then we became, people like AMD Unboxed because we talked about... It's funny, isn't it? When the product's actually good, when the product's actually exciting and actually worth buying, we tend to talk about it a lot, don't we, Tim? Have you noticed this? Have you seen this weird
I wonder why.
Have you seen this weird bias trend with Hardware Unboxed where if a product's good and the PC community, the review community at large are all pretty well in agreement that a part like the 700X3D is good, that we tend to focus on that and make builds with it and recommend it. Weird, isn't it? But that's just how it works, guys. Like, and that's why I'm so disappointed. And, Tim's used the term cope a few times, which he's not probably super fond of throughout this podcast. But that was me. And I talked about it in my my 7600X review, not because I'm a huge AMD fanboy and I want AMD to crush Intel. I just want exciting products. I want to recommend great products to you guys. I want to see great products. And this sort of comes back to the start of this question that Tim asked, like, what are my thoughts about the CPU market? And there have been parts over the last few years where I've been really excited. Like Intel's 12th gen was great. That was a really exciting point. And then AMD hit back with Zen 4 and that had some troubled start, but became really good. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, Tim. It's just, I don't even know how to answer your question about how I feel about the CPU market right now. I think probably the best way, and I'm rambling and going all over the place here, but it's a podcast, whatever. Shambles. I would say almost go as far as to say it's in shambles. Obviously, 13th gen and 14th gen at this point in time is a bit of a disaster. New microcode has just been rolled out. I don't know what that does just yet. I haven't looked at it, what it does for performance for those parts, whether it stops the parts from dying, what happens to the parts that have degraded, if that's indeed what's going on. So there's a whole lot to discover there. And we've called Zen 5 a flop, a disaster, which I think is accurate. Until the pricing filters down to the levels of Zen 4 now, it's not worth even thinking about. So I'm not excited. I'm very much in get yourself a 65 watt Zen 4 part or the 7800X 3D.
The way I sort of see it, like, and this is more just sort of a counter argument. I fully agree with what you're saying about the excitement.
You're not countering me, Tim. Don't even try.
The excitement of new products right now and the Intel side of things is not good. However, I don't think this is as bad as some segments of the GPU market because there's been a lot of complaints about, for example, there's no good low-end mainstream GPUs, which
is true.
It is true. There are some product segments where it is trash, like there's just trash tier stuff, especially when the dominant player in the market, NVIDIA, is giving you things like a 4060 Ti 8GB, right? So that's bad, right? If you wanted to buy a product at a certain price point in the GPU market, you actually can't get good things. Whereas with the CPU market, yeah, Zen 5, not great. Intel CPUs, can't recommend them. It is still possible to get a decent gaming CPU right now at a good price. The 7600 Zen 4 is still a great product at that price. The 7800X 3D, I think at the moment, is still very well priced, gives you great levels of performance, and other Zen 4 processors fall into that category as well. So while we would have liked to see more of a gain in this generation, Zen 4 is still recommendable. Like if you're building a new gaming PC right now or upgrading, there are still good options at most price points in the CPU market. So from that perspective, I don't think things are 100% dire, but certainly from like an excitement standpoint, it's more just like things are kind of going along as they have been for a while. Nothing much has changed. It's all sort of the same. There's good things, but there's nothing much happening. Whereas in the GPU market, it's kind of like, yeah, this really needs an urgent overhaul, which hopefully will be coming soon enough. But like it's a little different there. I still think the CPU market is probably stronger than the GPU market for mainstream buyers at the very least. So yeah, Intel certainly has an opportunity here, a big opportunity. When these sort of stumbles happen, companies hopefully will take the opportunity to increase competition, make good products. Hopefully, Arrow Lake is a product that is worth recommending. We've talked at length about how the platform longevity angle is something that Intel should and hopefully will lean into, provided that they actually create a platform that has longevity, of course. But these are all wins that Intel has there for the taking. Arrow Lake doesn't need to be that much faster to have the fastest gaming CPU. Especially at lower tier price points. It doesn't need to be that much faster, and it will be a product that's worth recommending.
Yeah, I know Intel has an unbelievable amount of problems right now that's clearly severely damaged the brand, but the way you turn that around, it's the way AMD, because AMD was a laughingstock 2017 when they released Ryzen. It was an all-time low. The company was a joke. Like, it just was. And they turned that around pretty quickly. We talked about the time, like, It's a big ship. Turning this thing around is going to take a long time. And it really, from 2017 on, it wasn't that long, I felt. A year on, not much progress. 2 years on, probably a little bit more, but not as much as expected. And I think it was probably about the 3-year point. It was like, wow, okay, everyone's out here buying Ryzen. And then it just snowballed from that point forward. So if Intel can release a part that's reasonably efficient, very good in terms of performance, the platform longevity argument's kind of gone out the window for these two platforms, because it's unclear if Zen 6 is supported on AM5. If it is, it's almost certainly going to be the last platform. Yeah. And if it isn't, it doesn't really matter, because AMD needs to communicate this to the buyer. Otherwise, there's not too much point having almost like Russian roulette platform longevity. Like, is it going to be? Maybe. Don't know. Wait until the last minute. Yeah, we're going to support it. Oh, okay, great. Well, I probably would have invested in a better motherboard a year or two ago had I known that. And then the next generation comes out. Is this AM5 or is it a new socket? And you just, you don't have...
you need the clarity ahead of time. Yeah.
That's right. For it to be, it's still a great thing if you get 5 years on and there's been 3 or 4 generations on the socket, or probably have to be more than 5 years. But that ends up being a great thing for the people who did invest in it. But it doesn't suck in more people. They don't know what they're ultimately going to get there. So, but anyway, my point is, new Intel platform. Presumably, you'll get 2 generations. You'll only ever buy one of them on the platform. But it's a platform. You buy into it, you buy a motherboard, you buy a CPU memory, and you have a good time. AM5 shaping up to be the same thing, right? Like, no one's going from Zen 4 to Zen 5, and then Zen 6 is a complete unknown at this point in time.
Yeah. So it'll be parity there for if they have 2 generations. I think if Intel come out and say 3 gens, then that puts them into potentially the leader position in terms of platform support. Now that, again, that's just assuming that each new generation is a new gen. It's not a 13th to 14th gen sort of thing.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, that's an opportunity that they have there. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like trying to capture the new platform builders, the people who are going to upgrade their motherboard, then with Zen 5 not being all that much faster, there's certainly, they don't have to do as much now for the platform support angle to sort of be nullified or equalized with the AMD side of things. So from that perspective, yeah, there's certainly a big opportunity there. And yeah, the performance of the part doesn't, like I said, it doesn't, like they're already, like, let's be real here. They're already faster for multi-threaded application workloads. So provided that they don't go backwards in terms of multi-thread performance, Intel already has the better processor across most of the lineup.
Yeah, if you exclude the X3D chips, which haven't been released for Zen 5 yet, they're also have leadership in gaming. It's just those pesky little X3D chips that are causing them headaches. So, and look, the even something apart like the 14700K, even compared to a 7800X3D, it's still a very impressive gaming processor. Yeah. I don't know what the difference there is in my. I could probably have a look in my latest gaming benchmarks, but I don't think it's huge.
5 to 10%, yeah, somewhere in that range.
It's 10% faster than the 7800X3D, which is, that's a pretty good performance uplift on average. It's very good, really. But that's the 14900K obviously gets closer again. That gets you to like 6% in favor of AMD. But they're not miles off the mark there. So as you're saying, if they can pull 10% out of the bag there, then you're at current X3D chips anyway, with worlds better multi-core performance. And that's the thing, like, once you get, and I say this, I think I've been saying this for a long time, once you get to a certain level of performance, like even a Ryzen, like the Ryzen, people talk about 6 cores. The Ryzen 5 7600, that's a very fast gaming processor. No one's installing that system and going, oh, gee, can feel those just 6 cores, not the snappiest processor, this thing for gaming. Like, that's a blistering fast gaming CPU, which is why people are head over heels for something like a 7500F off AliExpress. It's dirt cheap and it's blistering fast. So I guess what I'm saying is you don't need to have the fastest gaming CPU You just need to have a good value, high performing CPU that sort of ticks all the boxes. And if you're 5 or 6% slower for gaming, but 60% faster for all core workloads, and that's really a reversal of what we used to see, right? Back in the day, 2700X would get done in by the 4 core parts. It's probably more first generation Ryzen, but basically early on, Ryzen would get done in by the Skylake type generation CPUs for gaming, but then offer way, way better gaming application performance. So, and that made them better value all-rounder parts.
Yeah, I mean, the way I sort of look at it is that prior to this generation coming out of Zen 5, Arrow Lake was seeming like it was having to climb up a bigger mountain, right? Because if we were going to be getting 10, 15% more performance, more in line with the IPC claims, then suddenly, you know, a 7600X, the 9600X becomes, you know, close to like Intel's Core i7 parts, Core i9 parts, approaching Extra ED levels of performance. The Extra ED parts are obviously going to get faster. Across the whole lineup, the products improve in performance for the key thing that a lot of people buy these parts for, which is for gaming. So then Arrow Lake, you know, if it's only a couple of percent, 5-10% faster, they're not really doing all that much. Like they're just kind of treading water, keeping in a similar position to where they were relative to Zen 4 previously. But with Zen 5 underwhelming, like I said, they don't really need to do that much. You've shown that the 14600K, as it stands right now, is already a faster part than the 9600X. So
it's faster than 9700X as well.
Yeah, if they don't go
frame.
You know, the Core i5, you know, maybe you could get a locked part for less money as well. You know, unless they go backwards in performance for those types of parts, which would be just bad anyway. Like you're never going to have a successful generation if at the same product tier you're going backwards, right? So provided that they go forwards, keep pricing good, you know, they don't have to do that much to get ahead of the 7800 XGD. You've said it was 14900K is 5-6% behind. It's not that much. It's
well,
it's really not that much.
The 14700K is in our benchmark, most up-to-date 13 game average, is 9% faster than the 7700X. So if the 9700X was 10% faster on average for gaming than the 7700X, so if the 9700X was 10% faster, that would make it like a percent or two quicker than the 14700K. I think AMD were claiming to be like 5 or 6% ahead of the 14700K, which clearly never eventuated in anyone's reviews. But yeah, so if Zen 5 had have still got a good solid 10% boost, they'd only be just ahead of Intel for gaming, Intel's current generation, which, you know, troubled generation and all that. But then you go to all-core workloads. I think in a lot of them, the 14700K is around 60 to 80% faster than the 7700X.
Yeah, and single-thread performance is obviously competitive with Zen 5 as well. Like they're not lagging behind all that much. It depends on the workload, of course. Like Photoshop, I think you had Zen 5 clearly ahead. Still slightly ahead, but definitely in the top position. But like, yeah, the opportunity is there for Arrow Lake to be a good generation. Like I don't want to say that it will be or anything, but even if, you know, there's been some rumors of it not being that much faster and all those sorts of things, focusing more on efficiency. Like I said, ahead of the Zen 5 launch, I would have said that, you know, Intel has got a number of fronts to battle on. They've got a battle on efficiency, of stability now. Obviously, they've got a battle on that. They've got a battle on performance. But the performance angle has almost been taken away. If they can make it just a little bit better, a little bit, you know, they solve the efficiency problems, make this a better generation, new platform. I don't know. I mean, I'm more interested in Arrow Lake now than I was beforehand, just to see what can be done there.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was alluding to at the start, though, like there's almost no chance they turn it around with Arrow Lake. So they can head things in the right direction with Arrow Lake, and they can build from that. And if they have 3 really successful releases in a row, then they're back on top essentially. But yeah, AMD's given them that opportunity to mount their comeback as early as this year.
That's right.
Is essentially what it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, Intel's path back into at least the DIY market, and I should preface this by saying that Intel, they still do get quite substantial sales outside of the general markets that we talk about, DIY buyers.
Mm-hmm.
But the path back for DIY is it's just a simple thing that you see with every generation. It's execution. If they execute across multiple generations, which is what Ryzen did to take themselves from being slightly behind to equal, then ahead, then further ahead, or even just keeping up the pace with Ryzen, because potentially future Ryzen generations will also provide more performance and better features and all that sort of thing. So it's just about execution. And Intel clearly over the last couple of generations with 13th and 14th gen, that side of things is what has held them back from being more competitive today. The execution of the 14th gen, it's not really a new generation. That's why the execution wasn't there. So yeah, again, it's going to take a while to turn that ship around, but they can turn it around if they execute exactly the same as what Ryzen did. And honestly, if AMD can execute with Zen 6 and maybe even Extra D parts here, if Intel can execute with Arrow Lake, makes the CPU market pretty exciting in my opinion. So that's good. That's good for everyone. Competitive parts, nice, interesting things going on. That's what we want to see. And hopefully that's something that we will be getting. Let's take a break. Come back. We'll talk about boring lives. All right, Steve, we're back. What has been happening in your life? I don't want to hear you say that all you've been doing is benchmarking. I don't want to hear it.
Okay. Yep. No, well, I'm going to make something up on the spot here. No, actually quite funny leading on from the last podcast. So if you remember our garlic discussion, do you recall this, Tim?
Yes. Steve the vampire, or fighting off vampires with garlic.
Cough as you say that. So I mentioned my wife was very, very sick, and she went from some sort of unfortunate sickness that had that, that dry cough thing that just never goes away. She went straight into that to influenza type A, which almost everyone I know ended up getting that around the same time. So my wife got that. My two daughters had that, very, very, very sick. So that happened about a day after we filmed the last podcast, which selfishly is horrific timing for myself because, getting into Zen 5. And I'm the YouTuber here, Tim. It's about my feelings. Bugger my family. They can be sick. No. So anyway, get the CPU, start testing. They just so sick with this thing. And of course, I sort of come down with it as well. So you guys could tell I was a bit off in probably the last 3 or 4 videos on the channel. And I'm still struggling with it now. But I'm nowhere near as bad as my two daughters and my wife and a lot of other people who have got it. Balin actually just then came into the office. I'm not sure how he's doing, but he's been a bit rough the last few days, poor Balin, because obviously we gave Balin the week off because we're like, we've got to minimize the damage here. We don't want Balin getting this influenza because, we've got a lot of work to do. And well, first of all, we don't want Balin getting influenza. I think that's first and foremost, right? Second of all, I need someone to do B-roll. So anyway, we gave Balin last week off, and because he's such a legend, he came in on the weekend to do the B-roll for us, so we could get the videos out on time this week. And poor bugger ends up getting it anyway. Like, I was pretty good. I can't imagine I was contagious. The doctor gave him the all clear, saying that I shouldn't be contagious at this point in time, and blah, blah. Anyway, he got sick, so he went down pretty hard. It looks like he's on the mend now.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah, my wife's still battling hard as with it, but she always takes twice as long as I do to get better. The kids are back. They were down for about a week, but they're back in action now. And I've just got a bit of a croaky throat. You will have noticed me coughing a little bit throughout this stream and stuff. And I have a pounding headache this morning, so that's made it difficult to have this podcast and concentrate the whole time. My head's a bit throbby in the foreground, so poor me. But I'll pull through, Tim. I'll be okay. Don't concern yourself too much. So
my partner's similar out this way. She's gotten a bit sick lately. I've been doing okay though, which has been good. So fingers crossed that I can not get as sick
Avoid
as
that?
she had. She's not that sick. I don't think that she would have had the flu like your family has gotten. Probably just a cold.
Mhm.
So a little bit sick, but yeah, so far I've been going okay, which is good. So
Nice.
yeah, poor
Yeah,
her.
well-
she'll recover in the next couple of days, I think. But yeah,
To put a bow in that story, I have been triple dosing on the garlic. Like I've been just jamming that stuff in there multiple times per day, and it's kept me going. I'm attributing this win entirely to the liquid garlic, Tim.
yep,
Uh,
nice,
I think without it, we wouldn't have got the Zen 5 reviews. So
nice.
yeah, AMD has the liquid garlic to thank for our flop and disaster reviews.
Oh, and they will be so thankful.
Yeah. But no, like I don't know. The last few times they've got stuff like the flu and that, I've gone down pretty hard with it. So yeah, this time I managed to get through it with a relatively quick turnaround time and to get back in testing and get all the stuff done. But yeah, it obviously added a layer of difficulty to the Zen 5 content, having a flu. So it just made the whole thing even more frustrating. And yeah, the whole review process there just wasn't fun, because we were seeing bad numbers, and what's the problem? Is this how it's meant to be? Is there a problem?
Well, we didn't even talk about, right, that AMD did not provide 9700X versus 7700X data in their review guide to begin with. So
the whole thing's a mess.
Yeah, that was a mess.
We could really talk about this in another podcast. I was pretty pissed off with AMD. Their handling of it, it was bad, borderline incompetent. Yeah, not happy at all, really, with AMD's communication, how transparent they were. I mean, yeah, again, we could talk about this in another podcast, really. It's not
Let's
for
keep
the
it for
boring
next
life
week.
stuff.
Let's keep it for next week after Ryzen 9. But
make some notes, Tim, there, because I have some venting to do. Like, I have some serious venting to do. Yeah, not happy with AMD at all on that one. But yeah, we'll move on. So, no, look, I just of my boring life has consisted of trying to avoid getting as sick as possible, doing the liquid garlic, and work. But outside of that, look, you knew there was nothing I had to tell you, right?
I knew.
I've made nearly a video a day for a week now. I am wrecked. As I said, my head is pounding right now. As soon as we wrap up here, I'll be doing a little bit of Ryzen 9 testing, taking it very easy as I do so, just feeling things out, getting test systems set up and all that sort of stuff. And then I'll probably get an early night, and then I'll work all weekend on the Zen 5 Ryzen 9 reviews for next week. But it'll be a much cruisier week next week. I reckon by Monday I'm going to be 100%. And yeah, we'll do some more detailed in-depth testing. We'll really dig into this power efficiency stuff. I believe Steve from Gamers Nexus will probably have a content piece tomorrow. I won't go into details because we spoke privately, but it's my understanding that Steve from Gamers Nexus is a bit perplexed by all these efficiency claims and misunderstandings of Zen 5 efficiency. So they're going to dedicate a content piece to really unearthing what's going on there and looking at a whole heap of different stuff. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. And yeah, we'll probably do some follow-up testing next week as well. Anyway, Tim, I mean, on to you, mate. You've got to carry this segment. It's all on your shoulders now.
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't been doing all that much either, to be fair. I did go, so my garden, I have not weeded it for a long time. So weeds, oh man, it was getting bad.
Can't let that happen.
It was getting bad. But to be fair, the weather was, so I'm not saying that I went and physically removed weeds. I'm saying I used chemical weeding. Because
that's not very eco-friendly of you,
no,
Tim.
I
think we need to have a discussion about you. Okay, you're on a list now.
Yeah, I'm on a list. I know you do it too, so don't give me that crap.
No, I have 5 acres and I hand weed the entire thing because it's sustainable. It's sustainable gardening is what I'm all about, Tim.
Oh, for sure.
You and your chemical dumping.
Anyway, when you want to dump chemicals and ruin the soil quality and give people cancer or whatever the theories say, which is just
Tim's
not
your
true.
Man. No. Sure, God, jeez, I love this rabbit hole. You were like all skeptical of the garlic thing last week, and now you're just going into the sorry, Tim, but
well, anyway, we'll get into that.
No.
So when you use that stuff, you gotta there's certain like you don't want it to be too windy or too cold or there being frost or stuff. Otherwise, it doesn't work. 'Cause there's no point doing it. So for many months, it was.
If it's too windy, it's just because you kill everything else.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. So you don't want that to happen. Otherwise, my poor garden will just be a wasteland. So don't want to do that. So yeah, got to have the conditions right. It hasn't been right for a while. So obviously the weeds have just gone nuts. So went out, did that. Very satisfying. It doesn't.
It's not that satisfying because it doesn't die. You just spray it on.
Well,
It's like, well,
no,
I hope that works in 2 weeks' time.
It's kind of like you do it, and then it's like there's a week of like follow-up checks where you're sort of like, "Ooh, is it happening yet? Are those the? Oh, there's a little wilted."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's just started to turn into the like they're wilting a little bit. My life is so boring, man. I'm talking about weeds wilting. What the hell is going on?
Oh, it's so bad.
It's so
Continue.
bad. People probably think. I always feel like when you meet people and Steve's just completely collapsed over here. You know when you meet people and you have to reveal at some point that you're a YouTuber for whatever reason. Like I try and avoid it most of the time. I try not to talk about it too much. Sometimes it comes out that you're a YouTuber, and then people are like, "Oh, YouTube, that must be so exciting, man. You have a great job. I bet you're like living the life. You're like, making all these cool videos and doing cool things, and like, oh, it's so good. You're like community stuff. Oh, you're famous or whatever." It's
You're like, yep.
The reality is that I sit in my studio by myself pretty much all day, and then the excitement that I find in my life is seeing the weeds wilt like a week after I sprayed them. So the YouTube life, man. I'm sure some people have that rock star life, but for me, it's so boring. Like if you ask me what I did outside of work, man, it just couldn't come up with anything. But outside of weeding, I've gotten very much into the Olympics over the last 2 weeks. It's in the final couple of days of the Olympics. Australia has done very well for a country of our size in the Olympics. We've achieved the most gold medals that we ever have in an Olympics, so that was a big success. And yeah, I'm not familiar with many of these different sports that are on, so I just turn them on and it's like, oh, they're throwing a thing very far. That's kind of cool. Or someone's in a boat and they're going fast. So it's sort of interesting seeing people, do things, be really good at it, look really impressive, win gold, get all excited about it. That's kind of interesting. And yeah, we performed well in some of the team sports. Not all of them. There's been a few chokes there, especially the old hockey. Did not go well for Australia in the hockey, despite being reasonably, not necessarily a favourite for it. But
it's just like field hockey, is
field
it?
hockey, yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think our teams underperformed there a bit, as they did in the women's soccer, rugby sevens. A few of those weren't great showings, but yeah, had some success in skateboarding and things like that. So you see all sorts of weird different things. And as I've been going and I've been benchmarking a lot of monitors for content that will be up on the channel over the next few weeks, probably. So reviews to come. And while doing that, just, what random thing can I watch? Oh, it's fencing. How does that work? No idea. Let's just see how that goes. Oh, there's bendy swords or whatever. Cool. And then it's like, I'm sick of that now. Let's flip it over to judo. Oh, they're flipped on their back and lost the whole match in a minute. Interesting. So that's been my life. And I think it's been improved a lot by, in the early days of watching the Olympics, like years ago, at least in Australia, there was like one channel and it was whatever they decided was on was the Olympic sport that you would watch. And you have to put up with all the commentary and whatever. Now, at least here in Australia, on 9 Now, which is like Channel 9, one of our free-to-air TV channels, they've got an app like all TV channels have now. They've got all the sports. So you can just click on whatever sport you want. And you don't have to put up with the commentary or them choosing what you watch. It's like if I want to watch Belgium versus Germany in the handball, I just click on the handball stream. There it is. You get some generic neutral commentary in English. I think depending on what app you use, there's like other languages too. And that's been really good. So I just go through, I just pick and choose whatever I want to watch. And I think because of that, I've watched way more of the Olympics, because previously, like, you'd show something boring, like, I don't know, rowing's pretty boring. Not really interested in rowing. They're like, oh, Australia, they're going to go so well. They're coming fourth or whatever in rowing. It's like, no, I don't want to watch that. But now I just choose. I'm just like, okay, sure, I'll watch hammer throw or something weird, pentathlon, whatever that is. I'll watch that. So it's very cool. I've been into the Olympics. It's been great.
That is a scathing review of rowing, by the way. This is from a man that will spray some weeds with a liquid and get excited over their 2-week decline.
If there was Olympic weed spraying, I'd be all for that. But can't see that one getting into the Olympics anytime soon. I don't want to crap on rowing. Like, it's impressive how fast and athletic you have to be to do rowing. And
you'd just rather
I could never do it, but
watch weeds die over a 2-week period, which that brings new meaning to watching paint dry, because paint dries in a matter of hours. Weeds take at least, I would say, 2 weeks, depending on the type of weed. But like, you could probably do a whole study for them and spray different weeds and, note the temperature and all the different variables and how long they take to die. So,
well,
maybe the way the Olympics is going, that could be an Olympic sport in years to come.
Well, golf is an Olympic sport, and that's basically the same as paint drying. So, I mean,
oh God. I like golf.
Oh, well, I just torched you. Sorry, Steve. Golf sucks. No, it's not for me. Maybe it's okay to play. I've never really been any good at it.
You watch cricket and love cricket, so I feel like
great.
I feel like you could watch anything.
To be fair, the reason why I prefer cricket to golf is that cricket is a team sport and golf is an individual sport. So
there's a caddy, and sometimes he makes some calls.
They're just like a servant, the caddy. They just bring your stuff around and drive the golf cart.
Like a squire. Yeah, they can be, but yep, it's not a team sport. You're right.
Yeah, so cricket's a very slow and tactical game, and it's not something that I watch intently. Like, I don't sit there, I'm like, oh, I've got to watch every single minute of it. It's kind of like I have it on and then I see how it progresses over the 5 days. So it's kind of like you check in every once in a while and you're like, oh, this has happened and that's happened and they're using these tactics and that. But it's not, Test cricket is not something you can sit and watch, at least my opinion, for like long periods of time. Whereas you watch like handball, it's like an hour-long game. It's very intense. I don't know what's going on. That's exciting for me. I like watching that. So
Tim's like, you're like a toddler. Needs to be flashy and lots of things moving. I don't need to know what's happening.
That's right. I've got no idea.
Explains why you liked all the Marvel movies.
Well, I would say some of these Olympic sports are probably significantly better. Like, would I prefer to watch the Eternals again?
What about rowing or She-Hulk?
Oh, I'm taking rowing, man. I'm taking rowing over that.
Okay, cool.
I'll take rowing, but yeah. So anyway, Olympics, that was cool. Australia's hosting the Olympics in 2032 in Brisbane, so that'll be exciting. Next time's in LA.
Are you going to go?
Oh, probably not. I'll probably be too busy with work and stuff, but maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't want to get too far away from the weeds.
Yeah, true. I think what's weird though is that it's the Summer Olympics, but it's being hosted in the winter in Australia in Brisbane. It's like in July, which is weird.
That's still pretty warm there. Honestly, you couldn't do Olympics in Brisbane in summer.
Well, it's been pretty hot in Paris. It's been like 30 plus most of the days, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, what's the humidity like? It's probably a mild day for Brisbane.
Yeah, it's probably drier in Paris. Not sure on that one. Paris, if you live in Paris and for some reason you're listening to Hard Run Box, let us know what the climate is like. Is it humid there?
Yeah, compare it to your experience in Brisbane in summer.
Yeah, so if you're the one Hard Run Box listener that has been extensively in Paris and Brisbane, please let us know in the comments below. Oh, I'd love if that happened.
I feel like if we had 10 million subscribers and about that many people watch, there'd be a chance.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's much chance in that one. Anyway, Olympics has been great. It's nearly over, so there's that. And yeah, that's it. That's it for this podcast, really. We'll be back talking more about Zen 5, I imagine, after the Ryzen 9 stuff next week. We'll get into that rant about AMD and their communication. Also on Saturday, there's my video going out about their launch issues over the last couple of years, which I think is an interesting video. So hopefully people enjoy that as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's happening on Hardware Unboxed. So the end of the podcast, been a good one. Hopefully your headache and sickness and stuff improve and everyone gets back to full health over the next little bit. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.